Let's talk half square triangles. Now I'm going to show you how to make an oversized half square triangle that we can trim down to size. I'm going to be using the Studio 180 Tucker trimmer. But before we even get to the Tucker trimmer, here's what we want. We're going to start with 2 squares. We are going to place those squares right sides together. We're lining up our raw edges. Now, this is one of my favorite tools. This is the Studio 180 Magic Wand. I am going to use it to mark my sewing lines. Now, the Magic Wand has a laser line that goes right down the middle, and I'm going to put that laser line on both corners of my square. So I've got the laser line lined up here on the top left, the laser line lined up here on the bottom right. And then I'm going to use my fabric marker of choice, and I am going to just mark my line on both sides of the Magic Wand. Now you'll notice that I've chosen to mark on the white fabric because this would be super hard to see on the black fabric. What am I going to do next? So glad you asked. I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew on those lines that I just marked. Okay, I have sewn on the marked lines that I created using the Magic Wand. Now it probably looks the same to you. Let me flip this over so you can see on the black fabric there, you can see my stitching lines. I am sewing with a medium gray thread because it's a neutral. It's going to blend with virtually anything. So in case you're wondering, that's not really white. It's a light, it's like a medium gray. All right, so now I'm going to take a ruler and I am going to cut this in half. So I'm going to cut corner to corner. So I'm cutting right down the middle between the 2 seam lines that I just created. So now I have 2 units and I'm going to go to the ironing board and I'm going to press these. All right, let's talk trimming. Now I told you that I'm going to show you the Tucker trimmer method, but I will demonstrate how to trim down using a regular square ruler as well. So let's start with the Tucker trimmer. So this is the tool I really recommend. It is designed strictly for trimming down units that have a 45-degree seam line. So you can trim down half square triangles, hourglasses, combination units, which are partial half square triangles. So anything that has a 45-degree line, whether completely through the block or partially through the block. So the beauty of it is because it's designed just for that, it is marked just for that. It is super easy to read. Now, you have a half circle at one corner, and then if you rotate it, you have a full circle at the other corner. Why? Glad you asked. The whole circle is going to trim down to hole sizes. So if I have this half square triangle that I made, and I wanted to trim it down to, for example, 6 inches. So I need it to be 5.5 inches finished. Then I could use the whole circle side at my top right as a right-hander. I want to trim to a 1/2 inch size. I want to trim this unit down to 6.5. So instead, I'm going to rotate this around and I'm going to make sure that my half circle is at the top right. Now I'm going to line up that 45-degree diagonal line that runs across the tool. My half circle is at the top. I'm going to check to make sure that my 6.5 inch line is inside the raw edge because I want to trim all 4 edges so that I have a perfectly square block. That's why we're making them oversized so we can trim them down. Now, before I do this, I want to show you one more thing. I strongly recommend pressing your seams open. So I have pressed these seams open across the back of this half square triangle unit. And what that does is gives me a lovely flat unit that is going to be super easy to work with. All right, so let's watch the magic happen. So I've got everything lined up. You can see that I'm only trimming off a little bit. So it's not really like I'm wasting fabric because I'm getting a perfect unit. So I'm going to trim up And your pain point, if you have any whatsoever, are going to be up here where the seams are, where you've got double thickness of fabric. And notice that I am trimming away from me at all times. And again, I have not moved the tool. So just like with cutting my strips, I don't move anything until I make sure I've got a good cut. All right, so I've trimmed these two sides. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees. So now my two trim sides are going to be to the inside. I'm going to snug up because I'm wanting to trim this down to 6.5. I'm going to snug up that 6.5 inch line to the two edges that I just cut. Take your time. Accuracy is at every step. I want to make sure I get everything lined up just perfect. So I've got my 45-degree line on that 45-degree seam line. I've got my raw edges, the trimmed edges I just did at the 6.5. So again, I'm trimming up and across. I am making sure I got my clean cut, and ta-da! A beautiful, symmetrical, nothing wonky about it, half square triangle. Now, can you do the same thing with a regular square ruler? Of course you can. You've got more markings, you've got more to look at, but you certainly can do that. So your square rulers will have a 45-degree line that runs from top right to bottom left. And just like we did with the Tucker trimmer, we are going to place that 45-degree line on that seam line, and we're going to trim. So to be honest with you, the Tucker trimmer seems underwhelming at the half square triangle unit. It's when you work with units with more than one seam that really, I'm telling you, angels sing. But it's a beautiful tool and it's very clean. All right, so I'm going to cut up and I'm going to cut across. And just like before, I don't move anything until I make sure everything's trimmed. Rotate it 180 degrees. Now this is a 6.5 inch square. It is 6.5 inches from edge to edge. So I'm going to place the edge of the ruler on those cut edges that I just created. Okay, and I've got my 45-degree line on that seam line. And now I'm going to cut up. And I'm going to cut across. And oops, I can feel that did not, do you see that? Did not cut right there, which is why I always want to make sure that I got a good cut before I pick up my unit. Okay, and again, a perfect half square triangle, nothing wonky.